Picture this. You're standing in a luxury hotel suite wearing a housekeeping uniform, while a millionaire in a $3,000 suit throws a crumpled piece of paper at your feet like you're garbage. The arrogant smirk on his face makes your blood boil as he announces to his business partners, "Translate this ancient gibberish and I'll give you my entire monthly salary." Of course, someone like you probably can't even read regular English. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. That millionaire was Darius Whitmore, a tech mogul who thought money gave him the right to treat people like dirt. What he saw was just another uneducated cleaning woman, the daughter of the head housekeeper at Chicago's Grand Metropolitan Hotel. My name is Vivian Torres, and for 3 years, I had been living a lie, hiding behind a maid's uniform, while carrying a secret that would have shocked him to his core. You see, that crumpled paper he threw at me wasn't just any document. It was a 13th century property deed written in medieval Latin, something that would make his $1 million business deal crumble if he couldn't get it translated in the next few hours. His high-powered lawyers were stumped. His business partners were getting nervous, and his entire acquisition was hanging by a thread. But here's what Darius Whitmore didn't know about the simple cleaning lady standing before him. I wasn't just Vivian Torres, hotel maid. I was Dr. Vivian Torres, holder of a PhD in ancient languages and linguistics from Northwestern University, published researcher, and one of the few people in Chicago who could read that document like it was written yesterday. For 3 years, I had been hiding my true identity, working alongside my mother Carmen in the hotel's housekeeping department. After a devastating betrayal at my previous academic position left me broken and questioning everything I thought I knew about the world, I retreated into anonymity. The simple, honest work of cleaning rooms became my therapy, and nobody questioned why the head housekeeper's daughter chose to stay in the shadows. My mother Carmen had built her reputation over 15 years at the Grand Metropolitan through dedication and integrity. She knew about my education, about the PhD hanging in a box in my apartment, about the academic papers I had published on medieval manuscripts. But she also knew I needed time to heal, time to find myself again after having my life's work stolen and credited to a man who couldn't even pronounce ecclesiastical Latin correctly. But standing there, watching Darius humiliate not just me, but every hard-working person in that room, something inside me snapped. The protective shell I had built around myself began to crack. This wasn't just about a translation anymore. This was about dignity, about refusing to let someone's ignorance define your worth, about standing up not just for yourself but for everyone who had ever been dismissed because of their job title or appearance. As I bent down to pick up that crumpled paper, my hands trembling with barely controlled anger, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done hiding. I was done letting people like Darius Whitmore think they could treat others as less than human just because they had money in the bank. What happened next would wipe that arrogant smirk right off his face and teach him a lesson about judging people that he would never forget. Sometimes the most powerful weapon you have isn't money or status. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be who others expect you to be. Let me take you back to how I ended up in that hotel room, facing down a man who thought money made him superior to everyone around him. 3 years earlier, I was Dr. Vivian Torres, a rising star in the academic world with a corner office at the University of Chicago's Department of Classical Studies. I had spent 7 years earning my PhD in ancient languages and linguistics, specializing in medieval manuscripts that most people couldn't even identify, let alone read. I was passionate about my work, staying up until 3 in the morning translating documents from defunct monasteries, piecing together historical puzzles that had been unsolved for centuries. My research on ecclesiastical property law had already been cited in several major legal cases, and I was being courted by law firms and museums across the country. I thought I had found my place in the world. Then everything fell apart in the most devastating way possible. My research partner, Dr. Richard Kellerman, was a tenured professor who had taken me under his wing. For 2 years, we collaborated on a groundbreaking project, translating a collection of 13th century property deeds that would revolutionize understanding of medieval land rights. I did the translations, the historical analysis, the legal interpretations. Richard provided guidance and university resources. When our research was published in the Journal of Medieval Studies, only Richard's name appeared as the author. My work, my discoveries, my translations were credited to him entirely. When I confronted him, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Vivian, you're young and idealistic. In the real world, nobody's going to take research seriously if it comes from a 25-year-old Hispanic woman. I'm doing you a favor by lending my credibility to your work." The betrayal was complete. The university backed him, citing some technicality about research protocols and faculty supervision. My evidence was dismissed as collaborative confusion. Within weeks, Richard was being interviewed on academic podcasts about his groundbreaking research while I was quietly encouraged to find opportunities elsewhere. I fell apart completely. The depression hit like a freight train, leaving me unable to get out of bed some days. The academic world I had devoted my life to had shown me exactly how much my contributions were valued. 7 years of education, thousands of hours of research, and I was just a ghost whose work could be claimed by someone else without consequence. That's when my mother Carmen stepped in. She had been the head housekeeper at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel for 15 years, working her way up from an entry-level position through sheer determination and excellence. She was respected by management and beloved by her staff, having created a culture of dignity and professionalism in the housekeeping department. "Mija," she said one day as I sat crying in my apartment surrounded by boxes of research I couldn't bear to look at, "come work with me for a while, just until you figure out what comes next." The Grand Metropolitan was everything you'd expect. From a 5-star hotel in downtown Chicago, marble floors that gleamed like mirrors, crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars, and guests who dropped more money on a single night's stay than many families saw in a month. It was a world of luxury and privilege, but from the perspective of the housekeeping staff, you saw it all from the shadows. Working alongside my mother became my sanctuary. There was something deeply healing about the simple, honest work of making beds, cleaning bathrooms, and ensuring that every room was perfect for the next guest. Nobody expected me to have opinions or insights. Nobody questioned my intelligence or tried to steal my ideas. I was just Vivian, Carmen's daughter, quietly going about her work. My mother never once pressured me about returning to academics. She knew I was healing, and she gave me the space I needed while also showing me what real dignity looked like. Carmen treated every guest with respect, but she never allowed anyone to treat her or her staff as less than human. She taught me that there was honor in every honest job, and that character wasn't defined by your title or salary. For 3 years, I found peace in that routine. I attended therapy sessions twice a week, slowly rebuilding my sense of self-worth. I started sleeping through the night again. I began to remember who I was before the betrayal, before the depression, before I learned that brilliance without connections meant nothing in the academic world, but I was still hiding, still afraid to let anyone see the real me. I had become so comfortable in my protective shell that I almost forgot I had ever been anything more than a hotel maid. Until the day Darius Whitmore checked into the penthouse suite and reminded me exactly why I had been hiding in the first place. Darius Whitmore arrived at the Grand Metropolitan on a Tuesday morning in March, and within 5 minutes of checking in, every single member of the hotel staff knew exactly what kind of guest we were dealing with. He swept through the marble lobby like he owned the place, barking orders at the concierge, snapping his fingers at the bellhops, and treating the front desk staff like they were his personal servants rather than hospitality professionals. "I need the penthouse suite prepared immediately," he announced loudly enough for half the lobby to hear. "And I don't want to see the same housekeeping staff twice. I prefer fresh faces each day. Some of these people start thinking they're familiar with you if you let them get comfortable." My mother Carmen was assigned to oversee his suite personally, which meant I would inevitably cross paths with him. She briefed me that evening as we finished our shifts. "This one thinks his money makes him royalty, Mija. Just keep your head down and do the work. Men like him aren't worth the energy it takes to get angry." But keeping my head down became impossible as Darius's behavior escalated day after day. The first time I encountered him directly was on Thursday morning when I was cleaning his suite. He was on a video conference call, pacing around the room, in his silk robe and expensive slippers, completely ignoring my presence as I worked around him. His voice carried that particular tone of someone who enjoyed displaying his superiority to anyone within earshot. The acquisition should be finalized by Friday, he was saying to whoever was on the other end of the call. These Chicago people are so simple-minded, they practically beg you to take their money. I swear, sometimes I wonder if they can even read the contracts I put in front of them. I continued dusting the furniture, my jaw clenched tight, but Darius wasn't finished. You should see the staff at this hotel, he continued, glancing directly at me with a smirk. I could probably buy and sell their entire families with my quarterly bonus alone. It's actually amusing how they scurry around trying to please me. I asked for extra towels yesterday and 3 different people rushed to bring them like I was doing them a favor by giving them something to do. My hands started to shake as I cleaned the mirror, remembering every academic conference where men, like Darius, had dismissed my contributions with that same casual arrogance. But it got worse. Much worse. Over the next 2 days, Darius seemed to take particular pleasure in targeting my mother and me. When Carmen brought him his morning coffee, he would make comments like, "Finally, someone with enough sense to get the temperature right." Though I suppose even the help can learn simple tasks if you give them enough time. He started requesting specific staff members just so he could critique their work in front of others. "Does the housekeeping staff understand English?" he asked the floor supervisor within my hearing. I asked for the pillows to be fluffed in a specific way, and clearly my instructions were too complicated for whoever was assigned to my room. The breaking point came on Saturday afternoon when Darius was hosting a crucial business meeting in his suite. 3 potential investors had flown in from New York to discuss his acquisition of a small tech startup, a deal worth several $1,000,000. The atmosphere was tense with high-stakes negotiations and expensive cologne. I was in the suite changing linens in the bedroom when a courier arrived with an urgent delivery. Through the open door, I could hear Darius's frustration mounting as his legal team called in with bad news. "What do you mean you can't translate it?" he was shouting into his phone. "I'm paying your firm $600 an hour, and you're telling me that none of your Harvard-educated lawyers can read a simple property document?" The document in question was apparently the final piece needed to complete his acquisition, some kind of historical property deed that had been discovered during the due diligence process. Without understanding its contents, the entire deal could collapse, and his investors were growing impatient by the minute. "This is ridiculous," Darius announced to his business partners as he hung up the phone. "How hard can it be to find someone in this entire city who can read some old Latin scribbles?" That's when he noticed me in the doorway, having finished with the bedroom linens. His eyes lit up with malicious amusement as an idea formed in his head. He crumpled up the document that had been sitting on his conference table and threw it directly at my feet. "Here's an idea," he said with that familiar smirk spreading across his face. "Let's see if the help has any hidden talents." The crumpled document landed at my feet with a soft thud that somehow felt louder than thunder in the suddenly silent suite. For a moment, time seemed suspended as I stared down at that ball of paper, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird desperate to escape. All eyes in the room were on me now. Darius's business partners shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, clearly embarrassed by their host's behavior but too invested in the deal to speak up. My mother Carmen had started moving toward me from across the room, her protective instincts kicking in, but I held up a subtle hand to stop her. 3 years of careful anonymity. 3 years of hiding behind a uniform and letting people see only what they expected to see came crashing down in that single moment. Every therapy session, every conversation with my mother about rebuilding my confidence, every small step I had taken toward healing myself led to this crossroads. As I bent down to retrieve the document, memories flooded back with crystal clarity. I remembered the first time I successfully translated a 13th century manuscript during graduate school, the rush of excitement when ancient words came alive under my fingertips. I remembered my professor, Dr. Martinez, telling me I had a gift for making the dead speak again. I remembered the pride in my mother's eyes when I walked across that stage to receive my PhD, the first person in our family to earn a doctorate. But I also remembered Richard Kellerman's smug face as he claimed credit for my work, the university, officials who dismissed my complaints with patronizing smiles, the slow realization that my expertise would always be secondary to someone else's credentials in the academic world. The difference was that this time, I wasn't asking anyone for permission to be brilliant. I smoothed out the crumpled parchment carefully, my academic training automatically taking over. The moment my eyes focused on the text, my pulse quickened with recognition. This wasn't just any medieval document. This was a property transfer deed from 1247, written in the specific ecclesiastical Latin used by Benedictine monasteries during the reign of King Henry III. I had literally written my doctoral thesis on this exact type of document. More than that, I had published 3 peer-reviewed papers on the legal implications of monastic property transfers and their impact on modern real estate law. If there was anyone in Chicago qualified to translate this document, it was me. The irony was almost laughable. Here was Darius Whitmore, throwing around his wealth like a weapon, completely unaware that he had just challenged one of the foremost experts in medieval property law to do exactly what she was trained to do. Looking up at Darius, I saw him lounging, back in his chair with that insufferable smirk, already savoring what he thought would be my humiliation. His business partners were checking their phones and watches, clearly annoyed by this theatrical waste of their time. They had flown in from New York to discuss a serious acquisition, not to watch their potential business partner torment hotel staff. "You said your entire monthly salary," I said quietly, my voice steadier than it had been in years. "I want to make sure everyone in this room heard that promise clearly." Darius laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Oh, this is rich. The cleaning lady thinks she's going to earn herself a payday." He gestured grandly to his business partners. "Gentlemen, you're about to witness why I never make bets I can't win." One of the investors, a distinguished woman in her 50s, frowned slightly. "Darius, perhaps we should just call another translation service and move forward with the meeting." "Nonsense. Patricia," Darius waved her off. "This will only take a minute. Then we can all have a good laugh and get back to business." He leaned forward in his chair, his eyes glittering with malicious anticipation. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Give it your best shot. Read me some Latin." What Darius didn't understand was that I wasn't nervous anymore. The familiar weight of academic text in my hands, the challenge of translation, the opportunity to demonstrate expertise I had spent years developing, all of it felt like coming home after a long exile. I had spent 3 years letting fear make my decisions for me, 3 years allowing one man's betrayal to define my worth, 3 years hiding my light under a bushel because I was afraid someone might try to steal it again. But standing there in that opulent suite, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than hired help, I realized something profound. My knowledge, my expertise, my years of study and research, they belonged to me. They were mine in a way that no one could ever take away, no matter what they wrote on a publication or whose name appeared on a research paper. For the first time in 3 years, I was ready to let Dr. Vivian Torres step out of the shadows. I began to read the Latin aloud, my voice clear and confident in a way it hadn't been for 3 years. "Ego Henricus, de gratia rex Angliae, omnibus fidelibus suis salutum." The transformation in the room was immediate and electric. Darius's smug expression faltered as the words rolled off my tongue with perfect pronunciation, each syllable crisp and authoritative. His business partners stopped fidgeting with their phones and looked up with sudden attention. Even the air in the suite seemed to change, charged with an energy that nobody had expected. I continued translating, my academic training taking complete control. "I, Henry, by the grace of God, King of England, to all his faithful subjects, greetings. Know that I have granted, and by this my charter confirmed to the Benedictine monks of St. Bartholomew's Abbey, all the lands and tenements situated in the county of Cook, bounded by the Great Lake to the east." Darius's face had gone completely pale. He sat forward in his chair, no longer lounging with casual arrogance, his mouth slightly open as he processed what he was hearing. But I wasn't finished. Years of suppressed expertise poured out of me like water through a broken dam. "This document establishes a perpetual grant made in the year of our Lord 1247. sealed with the royal seal and witnessed by the Bishop of Lincoln. The property in question was deeded specifically to the Benedictine order, with explicit rights that transfer automatically to the current Catholic Diocese of Chicago under canon law provisions that have never been revoked. One of the business partners, the woman, who had suggested calling a translation service, leaned forward with obvious interest. "What exactly does that mean for the acquisition?" I looked directly at her, my voice steady and professional. "It means that this property has protected ecclesiastical status that supersedes any private ownership claims. The land cannot be developed, subdivided, or commercially exploited without explicit permission from the Catholic Church. Any attempt to acquire it without acknowledging these restrictions would result in immediate legal challenges that could tie up the property for years." The silence in the room was deafening. Darius stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. His $1 million acquisition, the deal he had flown to Chicago to close, was built on a fundamental misunderstanding of the property's legal status. Furthermore, I continued, warming to my subject as years of academic passion rekindled, the specific Latin phrasing used here indicates this was drafted during the period when King Henry III was expanding monastic privileges as part of his reconciliation with the Church following the Barons' War. The legal precedent established by similar grants from this period has been upheld in modern courts as recently as 2019 in Morrison versus the Archdiocese of Boston. Patricia, the female investor, was now taking notes on her phone. "You're saying we would need ecclesiastical approval for any commercial development of this site?" "Exactly. And given the historical significance of the original grant, the diocese would likely require extensive archaeological surveys, historical preservation guarantees, and community impact assessments before considering any modern development proposal. The costs and delays would be substantial." Darius finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "How do you know all this?" I straightened my shoulders and looked him directly in the eye for the first time since he had checked into the hotel. "My name is Dr. Vivian Torres. I hold a PhD in Ancient Languages and Linguistics from Northwestern University, with a specialization in medieval ecclesiastical law. I have published extensively on exactly this type of document in the Journal of Medieval Studies, the American Historical Review, and Legal History Quarterly." I pulled out my phone and showed him my doctoral thesis, published on the university website, then scrolled through my academic publications on Google Scholar. "I wrote my dissertation on Benedictine property grants during the reign of Henry III. The document you just threw at my feet happens to be precisely the type of manuscript I have spent the last 8 years of my life studying." The business partners were now staring at Darius with a mixture of shock and disgust. Patricia shook her head slowly. "You just humiliated someone with more expertise in this specific area than anyone else we could have consulted." "Your monthly salary, Mr. Whitmore," I said quietly, holding out my hand. $47,000. You promised it in front of witnesses, and I have just provided a translation service that saved your company from a multi-million-dollar legal disaster." Darius's hands shook as he reached for his checkbook. The arrogant millionaire who had walked into this hotel thinking his money made him superior to everyone around him was now writing a check to the cleaning lady, whose expertise far exceeded his own, in the one area that mattered most to his business deal. As he handed me the check, his voice was barely audible. "I don't understand." "If you're really Dr. Torres, why are you working as a maid?" I looked at him with something between pity and satisfaction. "Because unlike some people, Mr. Whitmore, I know that a person's worth isn't determined by their job title. My mother has more dignity and integrity than you will ever possess, regardless of how much money you have in your bank account." The check felt surprisingly light in my hands, considering it represented more money than I had seen in 3 years. $47,000, written in Darius's shaky handwriting, payable to Dr. Vivian Torres. For the first time since I had retreated into anonymity, someone had been forced to acknowledge both my expertise and my worth simultaneously. Patricia stood up from her chair and approached me while Darius sat in stunned silence, staring at his hands like he couldn't quite believe what had just happened. "Dr. Torres," she said, extending her business card, "I'm Patricia Hendricks, senior partner at Hendricks & Associates. We specialize in historical property acquisitions and have been looking for someone with your exact expertise for months. She glanced meaningfully at Darius before continuing. We handle consultation work for major development projects across the Midwest. And frankly, what you just demonstrated is exactly the kind of specialized knowledge that saves our clients millions in legal complications. Would you be interested in freelance consulting work? I took her card, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Professional validation that came without strings attached, without someone trying to claim credit for my work. I would be very interested in discussing that, Ms. Hendricks. The other business partner, a distinguished man in his 60s, shook his head as he gathered his papers. Darius, I think we need to seriously reconsider this entire partnership. The way you treated Dr. Torres today reflects a judgment problem that concerns me deeply. He turned to me with genuine respect. Doctor, thank you for preventing what could have been a catastrophic mistake. You've saved us all considerable embarrassment and financial loss. As the investors filed out of the suite, each offering me their contact information and apologies for Darius's behavior, I felt my mother's hand on my shoulder. Carmen had been standing quietly by the door throughout the entire confrontation, and now her eyes were bright with tears of pride. Mija, she whispered, I have never been more proud of you. Not because of the money, but because you stood up. You remembered who you are. Darius finally looked up from his chair, his face a mixture of shame and confusion. I still don't understand. If you're really this accomplished, why have you been hiding it? Why work as a maid when you could be making 6 figures consulting? I considered his question carefully before answering. Because 3 years ago, I learned that brilliance without connections means nothing in the academic world. A man stole my research and claimed it as his own, and the university system I had devoted my life to told me that was just how things worked. I looked around the luxurious suite, then back at him. Working with my mother taught me something. You clearly haven't learned yet. A person's character isn't determined by their salary or their job title. My mother has integrity, compassion, and dignity that no amount of money can buy. She taught me that honest work, no matter what kind, has value. I held up the check. But hiding my abilities because I was afraid of being hurt again wasn't protecting me. It was just letting people like you continue to treat others as less than human because you think money makes you superior. Over the following weeks, everything changed rapidly. I used $15,000 of Darius's money to establish a continuing education scholarship fund for hotel employees who wanted to pursue higher education. The fund covered tuition, books, and even salary replacement during study periods, ensuring that financial barriers wouldn't prevent hard working people from advancing their knowledge. Patricia's consulting work proved both lucrative and fulfilling. I started taking on 2 to 3 cases per month, working with development companies, law firms, and museums to analyze historical documents and assess legal implications of property acquisitions. The work was challenging and respected, and best of all, my expertise was valued rather than stolen. I continued working at the hotel 2 days a week alongside my mother, but now it was truly by choice rather than hiding. My coworkers knew about my education and consulting work, and several had already applied for scholarships from the fund I created. Darius checked out of the Grand Metropolitan the morning after our confrontation without making eye contact with a single staff member. Patricia later told me that her firm had declined to partner with him on any future projects, citing concerns about his judgment and character. The most important change, though, was internal. I had spent 3 years believing that one man's betrayal defined my worth in the professional world. But standing up to Darius taught me that my knowledge, my expertise, and my dignity belonged to me alone. They couldn't be stolen unless I gave them away. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to be diminished by someone else's ignorance. And sometimes the very experiences that wound us become the foundation for our greatest strength.